Alright boys, I want to check this video out, so if you want to check it with me, you're more than welcome. I feel like that was a good game to stop the series, but I wanted to check out this video that was released I think a day or two ago called What Makes RTS Games Fun? Anti-Snowball Design. I'm curious about topics like these, and I know some of you guys, probably most of you guys are as well, so let's check it out. Boom.
Welcome to the General's Gentlemen.
Uncontrollable snowballing in RTS games is not fun. Nobody enjoys being set back by a small margin and being destined to gradually lose. The mechanics of RTS games, such as resource acquisition and army amassing.
This is the game I wanted to play, by the way, Rise of Nations. This is the game I wanted to play a while ago, and I'll probably play it at some point.
Naturally lead to snowballing. However, successful RTS franchises tend to put checks on the amount players can snowball. Instead, excessive snowballing is more of a problem that can be found in poorly designed RTS. This essay will discuss how various RTS franchises handle anti-snowballing to help keep the game fun for all players. The intention isn't to negate the benefits of winning, but to reduce...
What is snowballing? Snowballing is a term... So basically, how do I explain this? When the game snowballs out of control means, like, let's say you're playing whatever RTS game, and you're 10 workers versus 10 workers. If you kill one worker, the game, if there's no attacks, it snowballs to the point where the guy that has one worker less just loses because he's so far behind. And this is something that a lot of RTS games have, where if you get ahead, it's extremely hard to come back, right? So it's like if you ever played in snow and you rolled snowball down the hill, that's a snowball effect. The snowball becomes bigger and bigger. And the earlier you do economic damage or get an advantage, the game snowballs into the late game more and more. That's what that means. Hopefully, yeah, when you get ahead, you get more ahead exponentially after that. That's the snowball effect. Hopefully I explained that well.
It to a more manageable level. Some anti-snowball methods are intrinsic to a game's design and balance, while others are engineered. This distinction can be referred to as anti-snowball mechanics compared to anti-snowball features. The inherent anti-snowball mechanics mostly stem from diminishing returns on the effectiveness of advantages such as army size and economy. Comeback features include army upkeep and retreat. Non-linear power curves of army size advantages reduce the snowball effect. This is often to do with the level of attention required to utilize units. 2 Sherman tanks in Company of Heroes are not twice as effective as 1 because tanks require so much precision of movement to avoid being caught by enemy anti-tank guns. While 2 are obviously better than 1, it is with diminishing returns. Likewise, utilizing heroes and spellcasters in Warcraft 3 require so much actions per minute. This effect is more subtle in StarCraft II. Stalkers have a large model size relative to their attack range, lowering the damage output of a blob of stalkers unless they concave. Terran mirrors are not decided by which marine blob is larger, but by which player can get their siege tanks in the best position. Diminishing returns of army sizes can be caused by attention needed to control units, inherent penalties of a unit being amassed, or having strong counters. The best implementation of economic progression creates vulnerabilities in the winning player. As a StarCraft player gains more bases over their opponent, they will have more territory to defend. They will be vulnerable to harassment, as their forces will either be spread thin or have gaps in defenses. The maximum base saturation of minerals and Vespene gas is crucial because it forces players to expand onto the map. Command & Conquer 3 has no hard saturation limits per base, but oversaturating harvesters causes diminishing returns as the Tiberium fields rapidly deplete. Regardless of how it's implemented, economic progression should be vulnerable to the enemy and capable of being reset. This can take the form of weak worker.
But see, I wonder for stuff like this, what is the best option regarding mining in RTS games? Like, is it best to have it like in StarCraft II, where you have diminishing return? Well, you reach a certain point of mining, like 16 per mineral patch and 3 per gas, and you don't gain more and you're forced to expand? Or like they just showed in the previous clip, where you can have as many harvesters but you deplete super fast. I feel like StarCraft's probably better overall for the game, like that kind of expanding, because it forces longer games, right? And it forces constant expansion, like a more fluid, I guess, gameplay.
Units, or territory points that can be captured. I'm not a fan of how Dawn of War 1 does its economy. Listening posts are tough and well armed, while power generators are safe in the base, and both resources have permanent global upgrades. It's not surprising that Dawn of War 1 can suffer from the snowball effect. Command and Conquer generals can have the same problem in the late game, with resource generating structures like black markets being built safely in the main base. Ashes of the Singularity also suffers from its region-specific upgrades like amplifiers and orbital abilities that are impossible to destroy.
I've never seen this game. Ashes of Singularity. Did anyone play this game? I've literally never seen this.
Or remove. The losing player should always have the potential to strike back a deadly blow at their opponent.
It looks interesting.
Maximum army sizes also reduce snowballing. A maximum population limit puts a hard cap on how big a player's army can grow, forcing them to attack before they lose the advantage. The defending player will typically benefit in positioning and trade better, often counteracting the army size disparity. The slow build speeds of StarCraft necessitate building excess production structures to rapidly replace lost units, reducing the advantage of having a large resource bank. Population buildings like supply depots or houses also help anti-snowball. The loser of a fight can immediately replace their lost army, but the victor has to construct additional pylons before further growing their forces or workers. Seemingly unrelated mechanics like selling structures can also have a role in anti-snowball. If you're about to lose a forward base in Command & Conquer, you can...
I mean, this is not necessarily true. Like, yes, like there are things to prevent snowball effects in all RTS games, whether it's economy or army. Like you mentioned, stalkers, like you hit diminishing returns of how many stalkers you want to have. That is true until you reach like pro gamer level, where once you get ahead, the snowballing effects they're not really weakened by anything, right? Like, if someone in StarCraft II gets an advantage, they will most likely win. Even though there are certain things to prevent the snowball effect, it doesn't matter if the players are good enough. AoE is anti-snowball? Well, yes and no. That's assuming that the weaker player will go for AoE and the player that's ahead will go for weaker units that are vulnerable to splash. What if the player that's ahead just goes for heavy tech units? Then you just win.
Sell off structures to receive a 50% refund and lessen the setback. As one team gains the majority of map control in Company of Heroes, their opponents will have shorter distances to reinforce from the base and return to the front lines. These anti-snowball mechanics are inherent because they're just a part of the game and weren't designed with anti-snowballing in mind. However, some features are designed to explicitly address snowballing. Most notable is upkeep in games like Company of Heroes, where players gain less income as their forces grow. Resource upkeep passively helps the players with smaller armies catch up. Also in Company of Heroes is the retreat mechanic, which means players can lose battles without having their...
Like, I guess Warcraft 3 has this, and maybe it's the best way to go about it, like the upkeep. So Warcraft 3, for those who don't know, when you reach certain population, you start getting less income. But I feel like that's not fun to play, right? It's just not fun at all. Because you get ahead, but then you're limited by the economy. And I feel like, even though maybe that's good for the game, it's just not fun. So...
forces annihilated. As a result, battle outcomes mostly determine territory shifts, and the loser can quickly regroup and counterattack. Company of Heroes has many strong anti-snowball mechanics and features which are necessary to balance out its pro-snowball mechanics. Units gain veterancy from combat, acquiring bonuses to stats or unlocking new abilities. In essence, veterancy gives further bonuses to the player who is already winning. This may sound problematic, but it's worth it because veterancy is such a gratifying feature. Tanks in Company of Heroes also tend to snowball players, because regular units have no anti-tank damage. Snowball mechanics are not a bad thing, because they can be really fun to benefit from. However, the more snowball mechanics an RTS has, the more it needs to be offset by anti-snowball mechanics or features. Anti-snowball features should be subtle, so that the winning player does not feel they are being punished.
Like Warcraft
Players
3.
in Company of Heroes are not thinking about upkeep or drain, it just passively happens in the background. Compare this to Warcraft 3, where upkeep hits sudden, sharp thresholds. Warcraft 3 enthusiasts may be upset with me here, but personally I don't like this system because it feels punishing.
Exactly!
On the one hand, the thresholds add
That's what I just said! This guy's smart.
strategic depth, because you may choose to maximize income by staying below the threshold. On the other hand, it discourages you from the fun act of growing your army.
Exactly! Dude, that's literally what I said! Like, you get ahead, and then the fun gets yoinked from you because you're ahead. It doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. I'm sorry, but it's stupid. If you play Warcraft 3, you're wrong. Okay? It's just stupid. Like, there's so many different snowball effects preventions and anti-snowball effects, but I feel like all of them have flaws, and none of them really have it sorted out.
Sudden alerts can create a fear of missing out. Well-designed anti-snowball features might punish the player for having an advantage, but it shouldn't communicate it so blatantly. Mechanics creating a defender's advantage prevents tiny gains in the early game from suddenly being game-ending. All RTS have some inherent defender's advantage due to reinforcement timings, but often more are required. Hypothetically, in StarCraft, a rush of 5 Marines against a defending player with 3 Marines will not end a game. This is because the defender has the high ground advantage in their base, and they could also pull workers from the mineral lines to engage. However, as the game draws out, the 2 Marine advantage becomes negligible when comparing 52 Marines to 50. Command & Conquer 3 has a different defender's advantage with repair drones on war factories. Defender's advantages should scale off past the early game so that it doesn't prevent one player from ending the game when they clearly have won. The speed of Command & Conquer 3's repair drones and the damage of SCVs in StarCraft become insignificant in mid-game fights. Meanwhile, StarCraft II's high ground advantage is negated by having vision. Multiple victory conditions presents
I think there's a, defender's advantage I feel like is very hard to get a good balance because it's either too strong or it's useless. Like StarCraft II Defender's advantage would work well if every race produced the units the same way like Terran. Defender's advantage works in TvT quite well, but it doesn't really apply in the other matchups as much. And the reason why it doesn't apply in the other matchups is because the Protoss warps in units and doesn't produce units out of gateways. Yeah, they do produce out of Stargates and Robos, but gateways are just warped in. So when Protoss plays against Terran, Terran doesn't really have Defender's advantage in the unit production, it's only the positioning. And then Zerg can mass produce insane amounts of units, and then it's like... It's a different kind of game, I feel like, at that point when you enter mid and late game, and your defender's advantage kind of goes away.
Back opportunities. Being able to win in Company of Heroes through victory points means the toughest army does not always come out on top. Being able to take and hold regions on the map tends to require a different army composition than one designed for an upfront fight. It also means one player might have an advantage in army size, but still has to remain vigilant because they have a disadvantage in victory points. The elegance of victory points in Company of Heroes is how territory capture interacts with mechanics such as suppression and smoke shells. Command & Conquer Rivals has even more comeback potential in its missile victory condition. The losing player need only steal the launch pads at a crucial moment to redirect its launch destination. In summary, RTS gameplay of gaining resources and growing armies inherently contains snowballing.
Don't you guys have fun?
As a result, RTS games need to implement anti-snowball mechanics and features, whether they be a natural consequence of its design or deliberately engineered. Successful RTS players should gain advantages, but the effects should be minimized to prevent snowballing out of control. Many RTS games have diminishing returns of larger armies due to the required precision of control. Army size scaling is also limited by stats, such as attack range and having strong counters. Economic progression should require expanding out onto the map, creating vulnerabilities to harass. The methods of gaining resources should be at risk of being destroyed or reset, such as weak worker units rather than global upgrades. Population limits and other various features like selling buildings can all contribute to slowing down the rate of snowballing. Engineered anti-snowball features like upkeep may be necessary if a game contains pro-snowballing mechanics such as veterancy. Good anti-snowball design should be subtle and not make players consciously feel punished for winning. Creating some kind of defender's advantage prevents early leads from being game-ending, but should scale off into the mid-game. Ultimately, it's not fun when small errors gradually and inevitably cause a loss. Thank you for watching. My name is Callum McCall of The General's Gentleman. I've done a whole series on RTS design, so if you like this video, then...
Well, maybe we should... I actually like this video. I like the topics brought up here. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just like too nerdy about this, but I really like these kinds of topics because it does make you think about things that you don't necessarily maybe consider. But if there are more videos like this, I would be more than willing to check them out. Now,
RTS franchises tend to put checks on the amount players
can
snowball. Instead, excessive snowballing is more of a problem. Of economic.
So there are different snowball and anti-snowball things. So I think first things first, I would say it's extremely important to be able to harass your opponent somewhat in RTS games. Like, I don't think your base should be safe to the point where you can lose economy. I think those games are bad and they don't promote interactive gameplay. I think you should be able to get harassed. There should be units to get to harass you, but they shouldn't put you so far behind economically. They should just delay your economy. There was an RTS that was being made, and they had the idea of making worker production free. And actually, at a time, I didn't like it, but the more I think about it, it makes sense. If you kill workers and they're free to reproduce, the only thing you're doing is you're delaying the economy, delaying the unit production by a bit. But if you kill the workers and then you have to remake the workers as well, you're actually quite far behind, especially if the players are like really high skilled. The problem is you need to balance this so that the harassment units don't just wipe out your economy to the point where, you know, you can't come back, right? That's as far as economy goes. And I feel like buildings like Generals has, where it just auto produces shit, is bad. Like, that just promotes camping. It promotes stalemates in the late game, and I do think that if there is an RTS game to be made, it should be limited resources that eventually you mine out. And I think, as far as that goes, I think StarCraft has it pretty well sorted, where you can only mine with a certain amount of workers, and then you need to constantly expand. That promotes just fluid gameplay, and I think that's the way to go about it, personally. Population is one of the snowball preventions, I guess, but not really, you know? Because if you're both having to make them, how does that prevent you from snowballing? It doesn't really. And recently, like, the more I play games for fun and not competitively, I think about, like, you know, are stuff like supply depots and overlords really needed? Like, do they add anything fun to the game? And I don't think they do. Maybe they're a good thing to have in a game, but they're definitely not fun to have. Where was the next thing?
Front lines. These
anti-snowball features. So this is where the Warcraft 3 thing was brought up, where your economy like basically in Warcraft 3, the more units you have, the less income you get. I think that's just boring. I think it's bad, and I don't like it. when you get ahead, you should feel like you accomplished something and you got actually ahead, and you shouldn't feel like you're being, like he said, punished for playing better at that point. I personally don't like it, and I just think that's a terrible, terrible design. Maybe like some other way, maybe a little bit reduced economy, you know, instead of, I don't know, like let's say instead of getting 1,000 minerals, you get like 950 or 900 over a period of minute, maybe. But the way Warcraft 3 does it is extreme, and it's so big to the point where people don't make units over that certain cap, because then you get no money. So I'm personally not a big fan of that, to be completely honest.
Be subtle, so that the winning player does not feel they are being punished.
Oh, that goes
Players
into that.
in company of
Now, Defender's Advantage, I feel like is probably one of the best ways to have anti-snowball effect. There are a couple of different ones you can do regarding this, how to fix it, quote unquote. I think Brood War had an extreme version where if you're up the ramp, the enemy units have a chance to miss, and Brood War, even though you were ahead, you quite often couldn't kill your opponent because the Defender's Advantage was so good. And I feel like it just prolongs a lot of the games. In my opinion, the best way to have the Defender's Advantage, have that advantage, is to have ramps that you don't have vision, like kind of like StarCraft II, but they don't punish your, you know, miss chance, hit chance, whatever. And another good way to have an Defender's Advantage is the unit production. So I think Terran in StarCraft II is the perfect example of this. When you get ahead, you can just teleport your units across the map and kill the opponent, like Protoss can or Zerg can mass produce and then run across the map. Terran has to continuously produce units, and I feel like any RTS game that has this, you're still ahead, but you can't necessarily just kill your opponent straight away, and it does have some kind of Defender's Advantage to the opponent. But this is a very hard to balance, because it's very easy to make something broken and overpowered completely. Battlecruiser is one unit and it takes like a minute and a half to produce, so. Iron choke points, also a big thing here. Well, that depends on the race, that depends on the game. Not every game has AoE capabilities or siege tanks as units and stuff like that, so not necessarily, but yeah. And then victory conditions. I mean, he talked previously about the more map control you have, the more you're spread out, but at the same time you have more resources. So as long as as long as the player is good, you'll be able to relocate your army somewhat quickly. So victory conditions, like Company of Heroes deals with the point system, but I don't really see how this is a snowball or anti-snowball regarding, like, if you're ahead in Company of Heroes, because the defender's position is quite strong, you're probably going to stay ahead. So, I don't know. I feel like this is something that's really, really hard in RTS games to balance. Because, I mean, as we saw in StarCraft II and in the other games, sometimes you kill a couple of workers and that's enough to snowball so hard you actually can't lose. Or the opponent can't really come back as long as you don't make a big mistake. But one thing that I 100% think is the unit movement should have collision. So you should not be able to stack 50 units in one spot. I think that's one of the best ways to kind of give that person that's behind some kind of advantage, because if the opponent just masses units, they'll be able to, you know, get stuck, and not all of them are going to be able to shoot and stuff like that. So I do feel regarding that is probably the best way to go about it. But there are quite a few things that you need to like consider making an RTS game, and I feel like if you mess up one of them, it can be quite problematic. Like from unit movement to economy to harassment to defender's advantage to snowball effects. Because if every game, you know, you lose a couple of units and then you're just dead, well, that's a bad game, right? But then at the same time, if you lose a couple of units and it doesn't matter, that's also a bad game. So as far as that goes, I feel like it's really, really hard to balance out. But I also like games that have unit movement like Brood War. Not the buggy part, but you know when you move a clump of Zerglings in Brood War, they kind of spread out and they move more natural. I don't like, for example, in StarCraft II, that all the units are just clumped up next to each other. It just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't feel good, I guess. But I might be wrong about that. But yeah, that's pretty much what I think about this topic. I'm going to check their YouTube channel. I'm going to also link you guys the video, so if you want, you can check it out. And if there's more videos like this, I am more than willing to check a couple of more of them next time I stream. If you're watching on YouTube, let me know what you think. If you're watching on Twitch, let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow.